Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. I'm Jim Cardle. The Texas legislative session has just surpassed its halfway point, and so far, a few of the top and key issues have been that of border security and tax cuts or tax reform. Dennis Bonnen from Angleton, Texas, represents House District 25, just south of Houston on the Texas Gulf Coast, and is chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee in charge of rewriting the tax code, as well as the author of HB 11, which recently passed the House and addresses border security issues. What's the future of tax reform, tax cuts, and border security in the Texas legislature hold? We're pleased to be able to visit today with Ways and Means Committee Chairman Dennis Bonnen from House District 25. Representative Bonnen, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
As I mentioned in the introduction, you have been one of the most productive members in many analysts' eyes so far this session. We got a couple big issues I want to jump right into. First, because you're chairman of Ways and Means, but second, because here recently one of the biggest bills to pass the House so far has been HB 11, addressing border security and devoting some additional funds. Talk a little bit, if you can, for our listeners. Just give us, first of all, a thumbnail. What did you do with HB 11, and what were some of the issues going through that to address border security, if you would?
Absolutely. Jim, I think every Texan should be very proud of the fact that they live in a state that is the only state in the nation who's made any attempt to improve the security of their border with the foreign country of Mexico. We're the only one who's ever done it. 6 years ago, we started doing surges at the border. The number we've had is way too many. What House Bill 11, coupled with the work we're doing in the budget, is to give a consistency to Texans to know that we're not going to surge and stop on the border anymore. We're going to have a consistent plan that guarantees that we will always be there providing that backfill where our federal government sadly fails to meet their constitutional responsibility. One thing I want everyone to understand is that it is clear within the Constitution this is the responsibility of the federal government. And it's important that they are held accountable. Even though Texas is stepping up, I still want to see the federal government held accountable to meet their constitutional responsibility. But House Bill 11 tells Texans, we are going to give you a consistent strategy that you can count on that helps to secure our border, and more importantly even than that, is keep Texans within the rest of our state safe from the transnational gang and cartel-related crimes that move through our border and into our communities where we all live today.
Oh, I'll get to safety here in a minute. First of all, let me ask you, because there may be some confusion or it's just difficult to understand. Explain the difference. You're looking at on the border both DPS
Yes.
and border security. They're different. One's federal, one's state.
That's
Talk
right.
about what you're funding there with this bill.
What we're funding, and largely through the budget, what we're funding is 300 additional DPS troopers to be in the border region and across state. Also, though, within that 300, Texas Rangers are of great significance in this battle because we need intelligence. We need to be going directly at the crime syndicates, the transnational gangs, and the cartels. They're who bringing the anguish into our entire state. They're the ones that are building gangs and crime activity in Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, Corpus Christi. We have to put the target on their backs, and we do that with additional DPS troopers, but also intelligence officers like our Texas Rangers. Parks and Wildlife game wardens play a tremendous role. They're also given additional funding to be additionally placed on that border.
Okay.
And so the reality of it is we're begging our federal partners to do their job. But in the absence of them doing their core responsibility, we're going to do our job, which is to work to make sure Texans are safe. And folks come through that border region with the goal to bring drugs, trafficking, smuggling, and anguish to the rest of our state, and quite candidly, the rest of our nation. And that's where the federal government's very disappointing, is that Texas is not just doing a job for Texas, but we're doing a job for the rest of the nation because the federal government just chooses not to meet their constitutional responsibility.
Let's talk about that responsibility as it impacts the Texas economy. A lot of election analysis has gone on, and some giving Republicans credit for trying to do something on the border, leading to Hispanics down in South Texas not voting as many expected, and it had repercussions for you all in the House. But tell us, if you can, a little bit. A lot of folks won't realize in Dallas, Fort Worth, even here in Austin, but do you see examples, maybe in Houston or south of San Antonio? How real is some of the gang and the trafficking?
It's tragic, to be honest. I don't want to be terribly negative here, but when DPS does a major sting operation and breaks down a sex trafficking operation in Garland, Texas.
Suburb of Dallas.
That's right, Metroplex.
Okay.
And they rescue a 21-year-old Hispanic girl who has been there from the age of 13. We have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm talking with Colonel McCraw, the head of DPS, who is doing a tremendous job for our state, and we're simply visiting about me watching with my wife the Houston news on Sunday evening,
Okay.
and seeing a 13-year-old boy, and in the news report they say he was macheted to death, and they believe it was connected to the MS-13 and El Salvadorian cartel-run gang. And he says, yes, I'm aware of that case. And he talks further and he says, 16-year-old. And I said, no, Colonel, I was talking about a 13-year-old. We were talking about two separate cases, MS-13 gang in the Houston area within 2 weeks of each other.
Machete
Murders of young people. The 13-year-old boy had refused to do the murder of his cousin that the gang had ordered, and so in turn he was murdered. And he also had declared his belief in Christ.
Folks, I want to thank you again for joining us. We're visiting with Chairman Dennis Bonnen, Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee and author of one of the biggest pieces of legislation in the session so far, HB 11 we've been talking about. Chairman, let's move to taxes if we can. Constitutionally, you and the legislature are really required only to do about one thing, and that's pass a budget every year. But tax cuts, tax reform, huge issue of discussion, and for citizens across the state, taxpayers. You're chairman of Ways and Means. You've been working overtime the last 2 weeks, in particular with hearings. Tell us a little bit what to expect and what you've been working on for tax reform.
Well, we're very excited at the opportunity. It's always fun when you're getting to cut taxes, and in the House we're ecstatic at that opportunity. We are looking at doing a very large, about a 25% across the board rate reduction on the margins franchise tax.
Okay.
I compliment the Senate yesterday. They passed a 15% rate reduction, but we believe we can do a little better than that on that business tax and cut it 25%. And that's the proposal that we're going to present in the Texas House.
Okay.
We also feel strongly that any tax cut we do, you are actually giving back money, you're actually spending taxpayer money. So a core philosophy, I believe, that is of great importance is that the tax cuts that we make, that they stimulate growth in our economy. And so by cutting the franchise margins tax, you are helping stimulate the economy. The other tax that does that we're very interested in, is cutting the sales tax. We've never ever cut the sales tax. The sales tax is paid 60% by consumers and individuals, ourselves, and 40% by business.
Okay.
And so what got me very excited at looking at a sales tax cut and making it a part of our proposal in the House is when I got the numbers back from the Legislative Budget Board and the Comptroller, and they said, we can't give you an exact number on the cost of the reduction of spending you'll create by cutting this because it stimulates the economy. So it's hard for us to fully measure the level of stimulation it will create by reducing the rate of the sales tax. And that is what is a cornerstone responsibility of us. It's great to say we're going to cut taxes, but we have a responsibility to cut taxes that grow and expand and further our success and economic prosperity here in Texas. And I believe cutting business taxes, cutting the sales tax, which is a consumer and business tax, very much does that.
I know you all in the legislature are frequently, if not constantly, frustrated. The comptroller For those who don't know, scores your bills under a static analysis.
Right.
Very, very conservative. Dynamic scoring takes into effect what you're talking about. But you all have left some available funds in the budget that Chairman Otto,
Right.
Chairman of the Budget Committee, has just released earlier this week or finalized. Talk a little bit more, if you can, about the impact. There are certain industries that are constantly in flux. We've had the oil and gas benefit. Talk about the economic impact, if you can, of what you're working on.
One of the opportunities, I mean, first off, whether anyone loves or hates the franchise margins tax, from a tax principle, it works properly. It is a broad tax with a low rate. And with what we're going to do in the Texas House is we're going to make that rate even lower for everybody.
And that was the initial problem a couple years ago. There were exemptions for major
Correct.
corporations. The conservative argument is that as low as possible, but capture everybody is what
That's
you're
right.
talking about.
And the same thing with the sales tax. And so what's exciting that we've seen in the sales tax is that I think a monumental opportunity for Texas moving forward is a lot of business opportunities, but data centers specifically. Data centers pay a tremendous amount of sales tax because they're having to purchase on almost a 2 to 3 year basis a significant amount of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're paying a large sum in sales tax. So if we make that rate for everybody, not just them, but for everybody, lower, we make Texas even more attractive in getting high-paying, clean, quality jobs, and it's multi-billion-dollar investment opportunities, which at the end of the day, that's also property tax, capital investment that we desire.
Well, it's something that I know you're going to be continuing to battle through additional legislation, probably here the rest of the session. We could talk a full show there.
Sure, but one quick comment I want to make too, Jim, that I'm very proud of with House Bill 11, the Border Security Safer Texas Act, is that we had all but 12 members of the Texas House vote for that bill. I had lead authors on that bill of Representative Eddie Lucio III from the Rio Grande Valley, Renee Oliveira from the Rio Grande Valley, Oscar Longoria from the Rio Grande Valley. These members recognize the challenge, and I say this to compliment them, but also more importantly to highlight the fact that in Texas, we solve problems. We come together and we work to solve problems. We have a problem the federal government has left to us because they won't do their job and they won't go to Washington and solve problems, but we will not fail the people in Texas and not work together and solve the problems of the day.
Well, speaking of the issues of the day, we're going to let you get back to yours, Representative. Thank you for coming by. State Representative Dennis Bonnen from House District 24 down south of Houston, Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee and author of HB 11 for Safe and Secure Border. We thank you too for joining another edition of Texas Insider TV. Remember, you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle. Thanks for joining us.